welcome back to my humble abode. I'm Becca, and I work at the Crystal Lake Public Library, and this month is National Jazz Appreciation Month. We use the word appreciation because every month should be National Jazz Month. But if jazz isn't your cup of tea, it is still National Poetry Month and will continue to be for the rest of the month. Today, we explore the mind behind the word tintinnabulation, or the sound a bell makes when it rings. Edgar Allan Poe is highly regarded as a mysterious detective of literature. Similar to Shakespeare, his story's been twisted and jumbled throughout history, which only fuels our fascination with him. He lived a troubled, short life, which served for the inspiration for his work. He is the reason that we have authors like Sir Conan Doyle and Stephen King. His Gothic style transformed writing and revolutionized the way that we structure poetry. Edgar Allan Poe was born on January 19, 1809, to a pretty much absent family. His mother died from tuberculosis, and his father had left the family shortly before his birth. At the age of 3, he was sent to live with John Allan, a successful tobacco merchant, and his wife Frances, in Richmond, Virginia. John and Edgar got off to a rocky start, with John grooming him to become a fanciful businessman and Edgar constantly ignoring him and writing little poems and drabbles about his troubles. They never agreed on money, which created problems when Poe tried to receive an education at the University of Virginia when he was 17. John gave him less than 1/3 of the money he needed, and Poe turned to gambling to try and stay into school. This surprisingly didn't work out for him, and he was forced to drop out and return to Richmond. However, when he returned, he found his fiancée, Elmira, was engaged to another man. He moved back to his hometown and published his first book, Tamerlane, which was a lengthy dramatic monologue with a bunch of other mixed-in poems. You can find this book and many of his other collected works that I'm going to mention through Overdrive in the library's ebooks section. Specifically, you can look for the complete tales and poems of Edgar Allan Poe or the Edgar Allan Poe audio collection, whatever suits your fancy, for most of the works that I'm going to mention specifically in today's video. So he moved back to his hometown. He publishes a book. He unengages himself to his fiancée. What is the next move? He joins the U.S. Army. I know, I was shocked. It was like when I found out that Elvis was drafted. I just didn't peg him as that sort of guy, but I guess times were different. Poe didn't find any adventure at the West Point Military Academy, though, because after 8 months he was kicked out for dishonorable behavior, and Poe was all alone again. He moved in with Aunt Maria and cousin Virginia in Baltimore, where he continued writing. He wrote 2 more books in this time, but still struggled to hold a steady income. His luck as a writer changed, though, when he won a contest in the Baltimore Saturday Visitor, who published his short stories. This won him an editorial position with the Southern Library Messenger, or a very popular satirical yet critical literature magazine. He became pretty renowned as a cutthroat critic. He was very ambitious. He took on one of the most renowned authors at the time, Rufus Griswold, and wrote some pretty scathing reviews about him. Poe was hooked. He had found a way into the fine world of writers, and he left the magazine shortly after and published his first official poem, The Raven. Quoth the Raven, nevermore. I love this work. Every Halloween I watch a dramatic reading. I loved the Muppet Babies growing up, and they do a poetry episode where Gonzo reenacts the events of The Raven. This poem made Poe a household name, and for good reason. It enticed all those 1800s folks. They never heard anything like it. It was so macabre and imaginative, and an original piece of Gothic literature. So, let's take a quick look at the structure of The Raven. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as if someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. "Only this, and nothing more." Let's highlight some elements within this beginnings passage. Poe establishes and builds a pretty dark mood through word choice and scene setting. We know when the poem occurs, the narrator's current state, and the preceding action, all within the first stanza. all very noticeable narrative qualities. His use of foreshadowing and repetition cue us in on the story we're about to witness. This poem is a wonderful example of Poe's specialty, narrative poetry. Narrative poems tell a story. They range in length, typically very, very long, and utilize rhythmic punches. Last week, we talked about iambic pentameter, which focuses on syllables to create a natural-sounding speech pattern. Poe hones in on this through a more ominous rhythm, similar to that of a heartbeat. The da-dum, da-dum, da-dum pushes the pacing of the piece, so when we have words like rapping and tapping, the readers can feel the heart of the piece, literally. After 1845, things went very sour for Poe again. His wife died, his financials continued to struggle, and his writings were scattered and unpopular. He died pretty young and virtually unknown. And, to add fuel to the fire, Griswold, the man Poe had roasted in the magazine before, wrote a scathing obituary for the man, which was meant to cause the public to dismiss his works. However, the power of good writing prevailed this trial, and instead of dismissing his works, the public was enthralled by this mysterious man. Ironically, Griswold is credited as the first biography of Poe himself. Now, in an attempt to sully Griswold further, I'd like to examine one more piece of Poe's work. Babel Lee was a narrative poem dedicated to his dead wife, or speculated that it was. It was the last poem ever published by Poe, so it's already shrouded in mystery. Here's a clip from the end of the poem. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee, and the stars never rise but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And so all the night tide I lie down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in her sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea. There's a lot going on here. Lots of repressed emotion, angsty yet beautiful words. Again, we have this repetition that acts as the heartbeat of the piece, so already we have a human quality in the writing. Then we have the sensory language, words with lots of S's, lots of I's, which kind of personify this idea of the beautiful sea. The poem is tragic because it points out the beauty of her death, the peaceful nature of her passing. I know it's a little melancholy, but it's truly beautiful writing. Edgar Allan Poe had this ability to create worlds with only a few words. He's yet another example of a genius born from tragedy. Peter Ackroyd has this book, Poe, A Life Cut Short, that delves a little bit deeper into his past and how exactly literature played a role. Very eye-opening look into what it takes to be a full-time writer. If you want to read up on any more of Poe's work or any other biographies, all the sources I've recommended are available through the library's website. I'll end today with one of my favorite Poe sayings. I was never insane, except upon occasions when my heart was touched.